justice and revenge, fate, intense love leading to intense hate. These are all different themes that surround the first part of a play called the Oresteia, the Agamemnon. This is the play that you guys have been reading. And we're going to talk a little bit about those central themes, a few symbols. And to get us started, I just wanted to briefly answer a few things that you might be questioning as you're reading this. So let's just start there. Let's start at the beginning. The Agamemnon is named after King Argos, and it relates the homecoming of King Agamemnon and his death or murder at the hands of his wife Clytemnestra. But this play is about so much more, right? It's a play written by Aeschylus, and it won at the festival of Dionysus. It also has just become one of the most important plays across time, and something that we pay attention to because it has these overarching questions and themes and symbols that really make it interesting and impactful. It's also really interesting and important for us for this class because of the interplay between the gods and the mortals. And in this play, specifically with Cassandra speaking to Apollo, Aeschylus and the chorus calling out to Zeus and calling out to all sorts of different gods really shows the interplay of myth and their religion and their specific gods that they feel intervene and are a part of their lives. Cassandra is intrinsically linked as a character to the god Apollo. In fact, she is the prophet or prophetess who was given the prophetic gift divinely by Apollo. But when she decided that she, didn't want to be with Apollo and scorned him, he couldn't take away her gift that he had already given her divinely. And so instead he cursed her so that Cassandra could, any prophecy that Cassandra has, no one's going to believe. So here is a conundrum for Cassandra, and we see this playing out in the discussion that's happening in the entire play. So this is a pretty important background story. There's a lot of background that you want to kind of take into consideration that I'll be bringing up. So the interplay between the gods and the mortals is pretty important for this. And it also speaks to one of the major themes, which is fate. So we'll talk about that in a moment. When reading this, you may have come across some words or some ideas that you were unfamiliar with, especially considering you may not be super familiar with reading plays or ancient plays, ancient Greek plays. So there's right off the bat, the second speaker in this play is the chorus. And the chorus is pretty important. There are two parts to the chorus, and it comes into play quite a bit. So I'll explain a little bit about the chorus. So in the ancient Greek theater, the chorus initially provides important background information for the audience so that we can understand the context that the characters find themselves in. Once the inciting action of the play is underway, the chorus then also comments on the events, and in some cases it even directly discusses or talks to the characters themselves. So the chorus is acting as in this play, as the citizens, the concerned citizens of Argos. So they are telling the audience what's happening during the play, and they act almost as a character having a discussion or argument, debate, if you will, with themselves and sometimes with the characters. So you really want to be paying attention to what the chorus is saying. A lot of times the chorus is talking directly to a character, as we also see with Cassandra during the moments before and the description of the murder of Agamemnon, or the killing of Agamemnon by Clytemnestra. Two different things you want to pay attention to, and you probably have already seen, maybe you've even looked up, but two different parts of the chorus are the strophe and the antistrophe. So the strophe meaning to turn. In the first stanza of an ode, it's essentially the first half of a debate or argument presented by the chorus. The chorus moves to the right, the strophe does, and they become one section of the chorus. Then another section comes in, and that's the antistrophe. So this part is also known as to turn back. So they are going to the left of the stage, and they are in debate and discussion with the strophe. So you're seeing two different sides of the chorus interacting with one another and talking at different times. Sometimes as a call and response, but most of the time as a discussion or debate, where they're throwing an idea back and forth and discussing it, such as the idea of fate, or the idea of the intervention of a god. They may also ask and condemn, and could also bring to justice some of the characters. So those are two different parts of the chorus, and it's pretty important to recognize that. Also, you want to take a look at the main characters of the play. So we are definitely dealing with the king, the woman that he brings, his slave, who is Cassandra, who he brings and wants to get prophetic knowledge from, even though, you know, we see what ends up happening. Nobody believes her in her wailing and calling out for justice, and prophesizing what's going to happen with the murder. And then we also have Clytemnestra. We also have her lover, Agesthus, and then we have some minor characters as well, but those are the ones that are going to come in to the forefront in this specifically. And the chorus really acts as these citizens and the ones that are speaking and contextualizing the play for us. All right, so let's dig a little bit further into this first theme, and I'm going to bring up some pretty important symbols that can be helpful for you, especially if you're writing an essay and you're looking for literary terms, or if you're looking for symbolic information. So the first real theme is fate. And this comes into play, and it utilizes language and symbol. Basically, Aeschylus, the author, is showing characters as possessing free will, right? In the decisions that they're making, in the way that they plan, especially Clytemnestra, planning for the revenge and death and murder of Agamemnon. They are all showing free will. In the text also, though, is an undercurrent that's very strong and is really kind of the opposite is happening. And that is that Aeschylus is showing that their life is ultimately governed by fate and destiny. And we see this in a number of different ways, especially with regard to the issue of revenge and the issue of revenging different lives. So Clytemnestra is the mother of Iphigenia, who has been sacrificed by Agamemnon. Agamemnon, before he leaves to fight at Troy, which he is doing to avenge Menelaus for the stealing, that Paris stealing Helen, he sacrifices Clytemnestra's daughter Iphigenia and asks the gods for a successful defeat in when he fights in Troy. And he is given that in terms of destiny. They are successful. And when the guardsmen at the very beginning sees the lights that are being, the fires that are being lit because of the news of the successful defeat at Troy, and the arrival of Agamemnon, the king, there's some symbolic information that's happening there in the language. There's also this, not also, but there's this symbolic idea or concept of the guard or the guardsman. And also we get lots of symbols of dogs, which come up and have a lot to do with loyalty and protecting. And we also see, related to that, symbolic lions and wolves, all protectors of realms and protectors of people. We also see the opposite of that, where the Clytemnestra is referred to, right, as a she-dog or a bitch, but she is the opposite of being protective, right? She's plotting and planning the death of Agamemnon. So we see this kind of interesting symbolic stuff happening. Another really important symbol that's happening that has that relates to the idea or the concept of fate is the net. Okay, sometimes we see it as yoke or net, basically something that's capturing or imprisoning somebody, and a lot of times it's referring to their life. So they are imprisoned. Agamemnon's at the very beginning of the chorus, it's referred to, Zeus is referred to, is setting off a net of destiny, pretty much. So this is something you also kind of want to take a look at. So on around line 360, we see the net of restraint. This is Zeus's net of restraint and destiny. In line 1120, we see Clytemnestra being her fate and her decision to murder her husband is referred to as a hunting net of death. We also see a yoke of necessity on line 1070. All of these things are restraints and are a reminder of this theme of fate, the difference between free will and the inevitable, the destined, or the fateful. So this is one important symbol that you might want to pay attention to, kind of look around for. There's another one, and it's about birds, and I think they're referring to strength and cunning in the play. And so at the very beginning as well, Agamemnon and when they're setting off for Troy, they use the symbol, Aeschylus uses the symbol of the eagle, the white eagle and the black eagle, and they're even eating a hare, a rabbit, and a pregnant rabbit, and this is seen as as a really powerful symbol for defeat, that they are going to be successful at Troy. And this idea that they are also like the heads of state and they are making these decisions. That takes us to this idea or concept of revenge versus justice. And I think revenge versus justice, it's a larger question, and that is that the question of what is ultimately the difference between revenge and justice. And it continually asks this question. One of the important things to consider is the idea that many refer to this as revenge and justice, as just revenge or unjust revenge, and what is the difference, and that just revenge can be seen as the same as justice, but unjust revenge would not be seen as the same as justice. And what does that mean, right? So what are we looking at here in terms, and what are we asking about here in terms of justice? It's a pretty important question. It boils down to a discussion about what is the greater good, okay? And who benefits from acts of revenge. It also begs the question, and we find out later on, this kind of storyline, this history, this legacy, this curse, that Clytemnestra's lover is willing to go along with this plot because he feels he is also avenging his own father for the misdeeds of Agamemnon's father, who both were rivals with one another. And the story is that I guess this really, his father is they're both fighting or vying for the throne, and he is turned away and he exiled, right? And when he comes back, he's asking for forgiveness, and the other father allows him to come in, but basically, boils his sons in a big stew pot and feeds his own sons to him, and then kills them. And this is a legacy, a curse of the family. The curse of the house of Atreus is basically kind of this following along this idea, this legacy of murder and revenge. That's an unstoppable cycle of constant revenge. And so we see it in this age-old legacy from the father's father, right? But we also see it with regard to Iphigenia, who Agamemnon sacrifices, and Clytemnestra ultimately loves her so very much that she plots to seek revenge for her death and kills Agamemnon. Then in the following plays, we see that Orestes and Electra plot out and seek revenge by killing Clytemnestra. We didn't read about that because that's in the next play, but it's this kind of this legacy or this cycle of revenge that just continues. And it's interwoven again, like I said, these themes are interwoven with each other because the idea or the concept of fate, that Agamemnon sacrifices and murders this young girl so that he can appease the gods, he really is caught up already in his destiny, because if he didn't do that, then he may not have gone to Troy, and he may not have been successful, and he may have been killed at the hands of Menelaus, or some other fate befall him, and been unsuccessful in his mind and in the chorus's mind. Although there is a lot of back and forth about speaking about justice and what it means to kill this woman, this young girl, for the good of the state of the country, right? So they are wrapped up in this kind of revenge cycle. And it's not until the end of the Oresteia that there is a true discussion of justice, and the idea or the concept of human justice being brought divinely by Athena is a part of this. But it's a pretty big question. What we see is continual death and murder, and the destruction of the house of Atreus, the house that Agamemnon, his children, and their family, back and forth. It's a tragedy, it's a true tragedy. So you see the murder and the death of many in this play. So it's not a happy, it's not a happy story, but it's an interesting one because within that, there are other kinds of things to look at. It takes us to another theme, and I think that theme is surrounding the emotional state that revenge, that asks for revenge, that is a possibility of that. And that is philos and aphilos, right? So love and hate is how we would refer to it. Intense hatred is spawned by intense love. For example, the intense love that Clytemnestra has for Iphigenia that turns sour and turns to bile, turns to hate, such intense hate that she's in the scene where she's killing Agamemnon. She's yelling that she's enjoying, right? She's enraptured in the killing and the slaying and the revenge, the blood revenge that she's getting. A lot of people would call this the eye for an eye, right, type of revenge, and eye for an eye type of justice. And that's another question: is what is true justice, and how do we come to an understanding of what justice is, even with regards to law? Because ultimately, the chorus, the people in the Oresteia call for justice and ask for justice. This is something that I want you to take a look at. There are also other pretty important symbols. The symbol of the phantom and the ghost are pretty important. Also might remind you of, Shakespeare, tragedies, Hamlet, for example. The use of the ghost and the phantom as speaking for the atrocities that have happened and that continue to happen. And to leave you on a final kind of note is to think about this as a circular kind of revenge, that it's continually happening, and that it really begs the question about justice. How do we seek that justice out, and how do we make it possible, especially with such tragedy and continued tragedy, that one person is revenging another for blood revenge, and it just continues and keeps going. And so that's where I guess I'll leave you, is with this idea, this concept of what is true, what is the difference between justice and revenge, what is just revenge and what is unjust revenge. Does it lie solely on the individual being killed or murdered? What happens when that is the cause for less death in a war or whatever? So those are some questions I think that kind of come up that are important. I want you to think about. So when you're reading this, take a look at things like symbols of birds and things, and symbols of the dog, the protector, the guardian, nets and webs. I didn't bring it up, but very famously, Clytemnestra is referred to as weaving a web and casting her web about her in her plot. So these are all symbolically important, but also thematically they connect to the larger ideas or themes, which are justice and revenge, love and intense hate, and their connection with one another, as well as the idea or the concept of fate and what is free will. Do these characters truly have free will? Okay, well, I hope you have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. And if you have any questions, let me know. All right, bye-bye.